Good morning. Welcome on in. Thanks for joining us, DJ and PK, on this weather-plagued Tuesday morning. I'm PK. DJ's off. Riley Jansen giving him the first hour off. He'll be joining us at the top of the hour. We're going to be talking some football. Steve Young said that's actually like 3 weeks ago. He came on with DJ and myself the week of the Super Bowl, and he made a statement. He said that he wanted to see Zach Wilson get with Sean McVay of the Rams because he thought Sean McVay could resurrect his career. Speaking of Wilson's, that he could sit for a couple years behind Matthew Stafford, maybe play a little bit, have the opportunity to take over. When you look at what Matthew Stafford has done, won the Super Bowl. I think the year before last was injury-plagued, but he's had 2-3 good seasons. And Sean McVay, wow, he's something, isn't he? You know, when he took over the Rams, they hadn't had a winning season in, I think, close to 15 years. Well, what's he do? That very first season with Jared Goff, boom, winning season. And then a couple years later, Goff takes him to the Super Bowl. And then they ship him off to Detroit, brings in Stafford, who'd never won a playoff game. And what does he do? He wins the Super Bowl. So when Steve Young says that, I think there's some credence to it. And when you think about it, it makes just a ton of sense because Steve Young knows what he's talking about. Obviously, he went through the same thing. He was 3-16 in 2 years as a quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Had like 11, maybe 10 touchdowns to 21 interceptions as it was. Then he gets traded for some draft picks to the Niners. You know the story. I don't need to rehearse it. We know what happened. He sees that. Now, he's in contact with Zach Wilson a lot. Obviously, they got the BYU connection, and he's been counseling him, and he thinks it's going to work. Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is because there was a report, NFL Rumors, an account has 300,000 followers on Twitter/X, said that he heard that the Rams would be interested in acquiring Wilson. And why wouldn't they? Because they got to start preparing for a quarterback of the future. And if you can get somebody on a relative cheap, which I think it would be like a late round draft choice at this point, you would do it. What do you got to lose, right? Have him sit behind Stafford and rebuild his confidence. Steve Young says it's not going to be easy to rebuild his confidence, but he thinks it can be done. You know, Zach has some scars and some wounds, obviously, because his 3 seasons did not go very well with the Jets as the number 2 pick coming out in, 21 was it? Yeah, so with that in mind, go along those directions and see what you got there. And maybe you got something. I think it was, in 20? And no, 21, right? And because he played the 21, 22, 23 season, 3 years, and this will be his 4th year in the league. I buy it. I buy it big time. We'll get Riley Jensen's thoughts on it. Frank Dolce is going to join us, too, get his thoughts. And spring ball, BYU, starting up on Thursday. Their spring practices are going to get going here very, very soon. Utah's right around the corner, too. I mean, it's March at the end of this week, for sure. It's a go time here with spring ball. What's going to happen with BYU in their quarterback situation? Is it going to be Bohannon? Is it going to be Retzlaff? Maybe somebody else? Probably not somebody else. Obviously, Rising is the guy at Utah, but what are they going to let him do in spring ball? Does he really need to go through spring ball? Maybe just kind of go through the motions a little bit, but if you get within a mile of them and you hit them, you're immediately cut from the team and expelled from the university. They got to find a backup quarterback. Is it going to be Rose? The youngster, Wilson? I don't know that he's going to be ready now, but maybe in the spring or training camp that starts in August, he can ramp it up, see what they got there going on. And then you got Utah State. What are they going to do at quarterback? Bryson Barnes going up there, and the Utes going to play them? A lot of interesting stuff with college sports in our community. One of the reasons why I really enjoy working in this community is because of the college sports. For me, it was always a college sport. Not always. Growing up back east a little bit, it was all about the pros. But then when I moved to Arizona, they just had the Suns, right? So it was a lot about college. That's when I really started to get into college sports after I moved to Arizona. And our market is just flush with it. We got football, obviously, and we got basketball. Big games tonight. I watched the Big 12 last night. Oh, my gosh. They do it again. The Big 12 basketball is just unfreaking real. I can't believe it. I can't believe how much I like it. I mean, I can believe that it's unreal, but I can't believe how much I like it being a Pac-12 guy. I've dismissed Pac-12 basketball pretty easy in favor of the Big 12. Rankings came out yesterday, and was the Big 12 of 3 teams in the top 10. 3. And Houston, of course, is number 1. Best defense I've seen in the country so far. And they got enough offense. They deserve to be ranked number 1. Kelvin Sampson at 68 years of age, getting the job done. They'll go into the conference tournament next month, obviously as the favorite, and they're probably going to get a 1 seed. And then you got Kansas and Iowa State. How about that, man? That's pretty impressive when you think about it. 3 teams in the top 12, and top 10, I should say. And BYU, they play 2 of those teams. Now, they already had Houston come in, gave them a good game, and obviously lost at the end. But you look at the rankings now, and Kansas sitting there at, what are they, number 7? Yeah, I think they are. And then Iowa State is 8, right behind them. And the reason why that's pertinent is that BYU has 4 conference games left, and 2 of them are against Kansas and Iowa State. And, of course, the Kansas game is tonight. You like their chances? Not sure that I do. Keep shooting threes in the row and keep missing. You're not going to beat anybody. As we've seen, Kansas State beat them last week, and then Oklahoma State, teams at the bottom of the conference. Kansas State, my gosh, they blew a 20-point lead plus, 20-plus points last night, and going to overtime, West Virginia, but Kansas State got the win. I mean, it seems like every game coming down to the end, at least the games they put on television, and overtime games. Baylor had that overtime game with Houston on Saturday. Saturdays for me, man, watching the Big 12 in the winter when I can't go out and play golf or do whatever outside. It's been a lot of fun. I've really appreciated it. I enjoy it. And I watched that game on Saturday. Watched the game last night. I watched both those games. There was a little bit of NBA going on. Jazz played tonight against Atlanta and Quinn Snyder. And watched the overtime game, caught the end of that, and then pretty much all of Baylor TCU. Baylor getting it done. Didn't want to have a 3-game losing streak because they had lost to BYU last week and then Houston on Saturday. So they go over to Fort Worth and get the job done. And they move to 9-6. TCU moves to 8-7. And BYU looking to get opportunity to win 20 games. Well, I don't think they're going to beat Kansas. Pretty sure they're not going to beat Iowa State. But, we've been surprised before, right? Maybe they can do it. I mean, it's not out of the realm by any stretch. But the thing about it is they've got 2 very winnable games with TCU and Oklahoma State at home. Yeah, as they're 19-8, 7-7 in the league. They got to get that. And then Fresno will provide little to no competition for the Utah State Aggies. Utah State Aggies in the rankings. BYU falls out of the rankings for the first time since November. Get a couple more wins, they'll get right back in it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Okay, coming up, we are going to let you hear from our guy. We had an opportunity to interview, speaking of Utah State, Mr. Great Osobor, the sensational power forward for the Utah State Aggies. Stay with us. That's coming up next on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5, The Zone. We're joined now by Great Osobor, Utah State's forward. Great, good morning.
Good morning. How y'all doing?
We're doing well. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I saw your post-game interview after the win against San Diego State, and there are a lot of things you expect in that situation, and to talk about the game and what a big win it was, but you went to playing in front of the crowd, and what a gift that was. That you talk about, this is what you dream of when you're young and you're shooting hoops, and one day you want to be that good. When did you know it was going to be this much fun to play in front of the fans in the Spectrum? When did it really register with what you have there and the connection with the fan base?
Honestly, I don't think I realized until the first game, like the exhibition game. And you know what's mad? I didn't even play our first exhibition game because I tweaked my ankle. And I've been hearing about the Spectrum the whole summer since I got here from everyone. Everyone was like, oh man, just wait till you see the spectrum. Just wait till you see the spectrum. And it got to the point where I was looking like, there's no way it can be like that good. And then the first game, we're playing a Division II school, and it's packed. And I'm like, bro, there's no way. And then I finally played in it, and you can just feel all the energy and support. And I was like, okay, this is for real. And it's just getting better every game, and that's been big time.
You obviously followed Coach Sprinkle from Montana State, and you were a good player there. But I don't think there's any question that you've upped your game here with Utah State. So as the competition has gotten better, you've obviously handled it. What do you think are some of the reasons for the improvement that you had in your first 2 seasons over there at Montana State versus what you've been able to do so far here for the Aggies?
I mean, obviously, we had a really good team at Montana State last year, shown by the fact that we won the Big Sky tournament and went to the NCAA tournament, and that was the second straight time we went there. So, like, last year I was a sophomore and I was playing behind the league MVP, and it was just a matter of me playing my role, you know, and buying my time. And then, obviously, once Coach Sprink got the job here, and he was like, great, we need you. Like, this your show once you come here with us because we trust you. Just, we're going to give you the opportunity to do what you do. It was pretty much a no-brainer at that point. Like, he wanted me to come to Utah State, and he was like, I will give you the keys. Like, you already know our system. It's your turn.
I'd like to back up in your personal story a few more years. You grew up in England, not known as a basketball hotspot. How do you come to the sport? How do you get trained in the sport? And how do you end up deciding to come play college basketball in the U.S.? Start with the beginning. How do you fall in love with the sport and get hooked on it?
So I was born in Spain, right? And in Spain, basketball is a little bit, it's more bigger than in England, how big it is in England. So when I was growing up, when I was a kid, I was like, I had too much energy, right? And my parents were like, okay, what are we going to do with this kid? And my aunt and uncle, my older cousin, he used to play basketball. They were like, you might as well try putting grade in basketball, see if that helps, like, help tire him out and stuff. So they were like, okay. So when I was 3, they put me in, like, them kids' basketball, like, practices, and ever since then I've been playing. So when I moved to England, even though basketball isn't, like, the main sport there, it's like, this is something I've been doing my whole life. That's all I know. So I was like, I'm going to keep doing it, right? Because I'm pretty good. But then I was going, playing different levels, and I was like, okay, obviously the goal is to go to America, play at the highest level possible, right? And we didn't know how we were going to do that. But then I ended up going to my school academy in Preston, and my first year there, Chris Haslam, the assistant coach here, well, at the time he was at Montana State, he came and see me. And I was like 6'5", but he was like, okay, this kid really, like, he has something, you know, we're going to keep an eye on him and keep in touch. And then that summer, from my first year at my school, boarding school, to my second year, I kind of grew to like 6'6", 6'7", and then it was like from there I started getting a few offers, and the rest is kind of history, you know.
The story of Utah State is certainly here locally. It's well documented as far as basically everybody leaving. Falsef obviously was a redshirt, but pretty much everybody left and the coaches leave, and all these new guys come together here and from various places. And here you are, Coach Sprinkle. We'd all be shocked if he's not Coach of the Year, and you still have a few ball games to go, but you're looking like you have a good shot to be Player of the Year in the conference. At what point, when you guys all got together, did it click to where you thought, we have a shot to be pretty good this year?
You know, I've been lying if I told you I need the whole time. But we had a tough game against Bradley where we lost in overtime.
Yeah.
But that low-key opened our eyes to the fact that, okay, we can really compete. And then, obviously, we came back, played a few more games. But the Cayman Islands, when we won the Cayman Islands, well, I was like, okay, we really might be for real, you know, because we played 3 amazing teams in the Cayman Islands, and I was like, okay, we can really do this. And then it was a matter of building from that at that point. Like, everybody bought in, no one had egos. We just wanted to win, and get better. And it's fun to come to practice every day and do what we do, you know.
Winning certainly builds camaraderie and chemistry. It's a lot easier to get along when everybody's happy because you just won the last game. And you guys have done a lot of winning this year. How do you build the personal relationships, and who are you closer to when guys are coming and going and moving around and maybe only on a team for a year? There's not a lot of time. Who have you bonded with and how?
I've bonded with the whole team pretty much. Like, obviously, that we had a few guys who were from here, like Landon Brenchley, Mason Falsmith, and Isaac Johnson. And in the summer, they did a really good job of, like, having people over to, like, their house, making sure we could spend time together. I spend a lot of time with Josh Duje and Carson Temple. Like those are my guys. Like, we're always together, basically. And just having people that you can relate to off the court, it makes it easier. Like, on the floor, if I tell Carson something, like, I know he's going to execute and listen because he just wants to do the best thing for the team. Because we're so good friends, whatever I tell him, whether it's good or bad, he's not going to take it personal. It's just a matter of winning. And same with Josh. Like, he's an elite scorer, right? But like right now, he's going to the role where he's going to come off the bench and give us that sparking games that we need, like Wyoming. He was the best player on the floor, arguably, that game. And little things like that just makes it better.
You're 10-4 in conference, 3 of the losses on the road, 1 at home. So you've won enough. You put yourselves in the position to win the thing for sure. Maybe, we'll see what happens. But I'm wondering, the losses, how much can you benefit from them? Because it's not like you've just breezed through. You've had some real tough games. And so thinking that, hey, these losses that you've had, maybe they could get the focus there and with the coaches realize what you need to do to finish this thing out.
I mean, absolutely. Like, I don't think we knew going in, Coach Sprinkle told us, like, he told us in January, no one in the Mountain West Conference is going to go undefeated, right? Like, this is an elite conference, an elite basketball conference. So the only thing you can do at that point is you learn from your losses. Like, you don't want it to compound and it become a thing. But when you lose, you got to realize why did you lose, and then take that and improve that for our games. And next time when we play a team, we're not going to lose. And again, like, as it's shown all around the league, winning in the Mountain West is it's not easy. Like, and especially on the road, like, it's super hard. So when you can manage to sneak on out there and get a win on the road and learn from that, it's big time,
Yeah.
Utah State Aggie star Great Osobor joining us right here on The Zone. You mentioned Coach Sprinkle. He's brand new here. You probably spend as much time with him as anybody in the state. What is he like? What has he got that makes him a good coach?
Now, you know what it is with Coach Sprinkle, yeah? He's so personable. Like, you see him and you talk to him, and you wouldn't have it that, okay, this guy is the head coach of the Utah State team that's whatever, like 20, 22-5 or whatever. Like, he really cares about people, and I can really tell you about it because I've been with him for like 3 years now, and I would say I know him as well as anyone out here. And like, he really cares about everything. Like, any minor little detail, like, he cares. Like, and he cares about you as a person, as a basketball player. He wants you to be your best version. So when you have someone in that corner, like, everyone just wants to do their job, because he's gonna bring it every day. And if he brings it and you don't bring it, then it might become an issue. So to keep everyone happy, we just all bring it,
How much did living in a town like Bozeman prepare you for living in Logan? I'm wondering if there's similarities there.
Bozeman's awesome. Bozeman's actually really cool. People underrate Bozeman. I don't know. If you've not been to Bozeman, you need to take a trip there. Like, it's really cool, little town, little city. Like, it prepared me for Logan in the sense that Logan isn't the biggest city, but there's a lot of different things in Logan to do. You just got to go find it. And that's low-key the same with Bozeman. And Bozeman's been cool. Like, I've seen this from the summer, and especially when you meet people from here, like, they show you around, you have a good time.
When you go back home, when you go back to England and people say, what's the United States like? What do you tell them?
Well, I told him it's different. Like, obviously, Logan and Bozeman are not different from, say, Florida or California or whatever. But I told him it depends on where you go. Like, where I've been, it's been cool, it's been whatever, but I've been blessed that through basketball. I get to travel a lot, and I see a lot of different places. So I just told him it's really different.
When you're done with college and all that, what do you want to do with basketball?
Obviously, my goal is to play at the highest level I can possibly can. God gave me a gift with my talents and my abilities, and I feel like I owe it to God and the people who've trusted in me to try and make the most out of it, you know. Obviously, I'm having a really good season. We're going to see how everything pans out afterwards. But I'm still a junior, so I still have a year back if I want to take it, you know. So
right.
We'll see.
I assume that if people are telling you about the Spectrum, they're telling you about other pieces of Utah State basketball history and all that kind of stuff. And you've still got, I think, 4 regular season games to go before the conference tournament. But have you heard about the rivalry between the Aggies and the Aztecs and how it usually works out in the conference tournament? There tends to be a third meeting.
Yeah, I heard that Aggies against San Diego State tends to be the final, huh?
It does.
It has been, yeah.
Yeah, I heard about that. Obviously, you don't want to look ahead and get yourself in trouble, but it was a great game last time. I'd be down to see them again. They're an amazing team. It'd be a fun way to end the conference.
Well, great. We appreciate talking to you. I guess for people who haven't heard the story, why are you named Great? How are you named Great?
So when my parents first found out they were going to have me, my parents, like, we come from a really religious household, so my parents were like, "Wow, God is great!" Like, and they were so filled with joy that they were like, "Okay." My daughter's like, "Great, that's it. We're gonna go with great."
And there it is. Well, we appreciate a few minutes of your time and getting to know you better. Thanks for joining us here on the radio this morning.
Appreciate you guys having me. Thank you very much.
Great Osobor, Utah State star player. The Aggies are rolling. They get a Saturday off and then 4 games and then off to the conference tournament.
Yeah, I go by Patrick, but I was actually named Mediocre.
That a kid.
Yeah.
Could have been worse.
I would have thought it was middling.
Yeah. They contemplated sucky.
Now you're going to see that on social media if you turn on your notifications. I'd recommend not doing that. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Hey, Yak, speaking of text message, social media, has anybody tried to guess what you were talking about in the last break? Are they pretty accurate?
They nailed it.
Yeah, they figured it out.
Didn't take very long.
Nailed it. I see what you think. Fine.
There you go. That was Great Osobor. Coming up next, we're going to hear from Steve Cleveland. Stay with us right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. DJ's off. Riley Jensen sitting in. Joining us now is the former BYU and Fresno State coach, Steve Cleveland. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Hey, I got bad news for you. You've been replaced.
What's that by?
I'll tell you. And you're going to know where I'm going to go with this. In a multi-decade, a little bit longer than I'd like to think, in terms of 4 decades in this business, to date, and this was replaced over the weekend, the most incredible, astounding thing that I'd ever seen in terms of stunning upsets was you taking that team into New Mexico, riding a 40-some game winning streak your first year, and beating the Lobos in the pit. It was just jaw-dropping, mouth-opening. Couldn't believe that it happened. Well, I think I've since replaced that. New Mexico at home on Saturday loses to the Air Force Academy. I couldn't believe it when I saw that, man. There's just no way that happens, but yet it happens. So in terms of the most stunning win in WAC Mountain West history, I think I've got a new first-place team.
Let me tell you why you cannot replace that game. Because the circumstances are, first year, we've won 7 games. We've got a makeshift team of guys we put together, biggest hearts in the world. And we get up that morning to play to travel, snowing everywhere. We have to take a bus. We have to take a bus to Vegas, fly to Albuquerque, get there at 2 a.m. No, we just let them sleep till about 9 or 10 o'clock, put some food in them, we'll let them go back to sleep, had no shoot around, warmed up before the game, had a 14-point lead at half. It was tied very quickly in the second half. Then we go on a run making threes from everywhere, and we win that game. And do you remember the sports babe? Long time.
Yeah.
She calls me late that night to congratulate me. I thought, okay, I've made it. I'm on national radio. But the thing that's most amazing about that is the next night we go to UTEP. The Hall of Fame coach, Don Haskins, and he comes down when we're having a shoot around and congratulates us on the win. And I may have told this story before, but anyway, he said, come up to my office and let's chat. And then we talked. He congratulated me. He said, listen, I'm going to give you some advice. Number one, whoever's making that schedule, you need to get control of it. Otherwise, you'll schedule yourself right out of a game. And he said, number two, you're going to need better players. He said, as big as that win, in this league, you got to have better players. So you got to go out and recruit. And the last thing, I tell you this honestly, is actually the X's and O's. He was so kind to us that night. We beat him in triple overtime. Amazing win. We qualified for the WAC tournament. That will go down for me in every game I ever coached, the greatest weekend with a group of great young men. We were undermanned and inexperienced, including the coaches, and we walked away with an amazing weekend, qualified for the WAC tournament. And as it turns out, I had beat Bill Self, who was at Tulsa at that time. We played them in the first round of the WAC tournament, and they nipped us by 3, and the season was over. But that was a special time. Thanks for bringing that up. That is not – no way the New Mexico game. I couldn't tell you a member of the New Mexico team, but the fact that they're 9-6 in league tells me that they were a little more prepared to, get beat by Air Force. Though Joe Scott, I believe, is still coaching at Air Force, isn't he?
He's back.
He's back, yeah. And listen, that's a really tough type team to play. I mean, you get behind in games like that, they're so disciplined. So it doesn't surprise me that Joe and the Air Force Academy could pull that off. But you're right. That's something nobody would expect.
Yeah, I mean, this Air Force team has lost 14 of 15 games coming into that.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys were bad, and you were supposed to be bad, and you were bad. But I don't think you were that bad.
We had 8 losses in a row, and we had 6 losses in a row in that season. 14 losses in about 17 games. So I know what that feels like. But I'm going to give some love to you about that, because that is a big-time upset, and especially for a team that is supposed to be a 9th seed in the NCAA tournament. They're going to have to – I mean, they got to go – they're going to probably get beat at Boise State. They'll beat Fresno. They're going to get beat by USU. They did have a great win against Colorado State, which will probably maybe get them into the last 4 in. But they're in a little bit of jeopardy looking at after that loss and kind of what's happened in the past and what's ahead of them, having to play at USU and having to play at Boise State.
Right. And moving into what's going on today, I mean, the Cougars with a huge win over Baylor, and then the last 2 Saturdays on the road, teams that you think you could win, they lose coincidentally by 10 points in each game. I want to say, wow, I'm surprised, but I've been there, man. I've been on the road with college basketball teams, and I don't know that anything is really going to surprise me in terms of in this Big 12 where a team is going to go on the road against a team that in Kansas State they'd already beat, Oklahoma State last place, but doesn't matter, man, on those particular days. If you're not hitting, and they weren't hitting the threes, the Cougs were in trouble.
Well, there's no question about that. And I think that when Khalifa is doing his magic and making threes and guys are supporting him with that, they're a really hard team to beat. I think BYU's 2-7 on the road. There's no shame in that. My goodness, it's the best conference in America. But it does come down to that. They beat Baylor. They hit 14 threes. Baylor hits 5. They out-rebounded them as well and had 20 assists versus 8. So BYU played amazingly well against Baylor. But then you get to KSU, who really made a run at them at home here at BYU, but played so well. And you can look at it, yes, they were 6 for 31 from the three. That's 19%. You're not going to win. First of all, if you're going to commit to that many threes and only make 6 of them, that's a bad situation. The other thing is that their three-point shooting was off, but defensively, Kansas State shot 56% from the floor, 46% from the three. And like we've said here multiple times, on any given day or night or whatever the circumstances are, you can get beat in this league. But it's really tough to win on the road. And again, you just got poor shooting throughout. And it was a game of Tiki goes 6 and 3, and we're just kind of out of sync. They'll get it back. They'll be ready to kind of go forward. But you got to jump into Kansas, who has really surprisingly to me let 2 or 3 games get away where they could easily be right there with Houston at 11 and 3. So we know what Kansas is capable of. They play about 7 guys, 20 minutes, but they've got 6 or 7 guys that score in double figures, and it's going to be tough to win on the road. But again, the great equalizer, anytime if BYU goes on the road and is knocking down 10, 12, 13 threes, they will always be in the game. And if Khalifa can come in there and the key is, does Khalifa hit a couple of early threes? Because when he does, they have to go out to him. Then all of that motion works, and it's hard to guard. And it's the reason they've kind of gone away from Traore at times, because they just sag in, and you can take a big and just sag and take all the back cuts and all the curl cuts, and it's harder to run. But when your 5-man is making threes, it's really, really hard to beat BYU.
This time of season, obviously fans get really excited about bracketology and who's going to be where and all that kind of stuff. As a coach, I know when you were a coach, you're going to say it's always about the next game, but are you peeking at that stuff? Are there people that have inside scoop for you on like what your seed is going to be or what it's going to look like depending on how you finish?
No. Let me tell you this. I mean, in the first 2 or 3 years when we were rebuilding BYU, we were trying to get to the NIT, and then when we got to the point where we had won some championships and we got to the tournament, I can't ever remember even thinking about that. I spent a lot of time thinking about getting to the tournament, what we had to do to get there, but it wasn't so much about a seed. Today, it's a little bit different, and with BYU where they're in the mix, and I can't imagine they've even discussed that ever with their team, and it's kind of like they need to focus on Kansas. And
sure.
Players think about that, coaches think about that personally and privately, yeah. But I can't imagine ever a coaching staff ever discussing that with their team. But certainly it's always kind of in the back of your mind. You're watching what's happening and excited. For me, it was kind of like, let's get to the tournament. For these guys, they're looking at, playing a couple of home games, in the tournament, the first 2 rounds. That'd be awesome. So we shall see what happens there. But, yeah, it's all that stuff's on your mind. It's just not shared with the team, and players talk about it.
Coach Steve Cleveland joining us. Okay, you mentioned about the threes, and they weren't hitting for the Cougs on Saturday in Manhattan. Did you ever think about maybe, all right, guys, we're just not hitting these today. How about we back off a little bit and look for better shots?
That's a great question. And I kind of lived through that, and I've gone back and looked at times when, we did too much of one thing and we should have got away from it. I've not talked to Mark Pope of that. I know they put themselves in a position to get to the tournament. It's a log jam in the middle there at 7-7 and 8-6. So who knows how this will all play out. For me personally, I would be giving, if he's not hitting threes and we're not knocking threes down, I'm playing Traore 20, 25 minutes because it's somebody we can throw it to. And I would imagine that Foose his confidence has probably gone up and down during the course of this year because he's playing and then he's not, he's on, he's not, and even though you love it as a fan, you can love it as a coaching staff to know that you've got two inside post players, one that can play the perimeter, and Khalif's shown he can make some moves around the post. But I would really look if this thing goes south with the 3-point shooting. It's not that they're going to stop running what they run, but there may be more of a focus on posting up Traore or posting up a guy like Saunders, who's going to be guarded by a 6'4" or 6'5" guy. Maybe post your guards up a little bit. Waterman's not been real effective ever in the perimeter, but I do believe that if this continues, where we're not able to knock some threes down and stretch the floor, or just get that action, a little inside-out action is something I wouldn't be afraid to do, and I would recommend that they do it in those situations.
When you're coaching at BYU, one of the great parts about coaching at BYU are fans. I would also argue that one of the hard things about coaching at BYU are the fans. Looking back at it, at this time of year, does that affect your players? Do the fans and the excitement or the disappointment, does that affect your players? And as a coach, do you have to coach through that?
Probably more today than ever. With social media, I mean, everything is in the moment, in the minute. Mm-hmm. We watch it. We can read about it. We'll just dissect it for 2 or 3 days. And my suggestion, and I'm sure that the coaches have talked about this, but that you start listening and reading to talk radio. We want people to listen to us, but it gets players. Okay, I mean they have to be isolated. Listen, they know those kids. The first thing they do when they get in the locker room and if they've celebrated or whatever, they're looking at their phone, and what they're really seeing and feeling and reading about. All of a sudden, sports columnists, fans, everybody's all over you. So I think they have to learn how to manage that. Only the coaching staff would know that, and I'm not necessarily talking about Mark. I mean, they've got 6 or 7 guys on their staff. That has to be a responsibility to control that environment, not let them get too high, not let them get too low when media or fans or their family members, are disgusted with their play. It's kind of like you just got to isolate yourself from that the best you can. But we're being really naive if we think that players across the country don't know exactly what's going on within minutes after that game, and then continuing until you get to the next game and everybody gets re-pumped up about who we're going to play next. The good news is with most fan bases, they're forgiving and they forget, and let's get excited about the next game. And that may not be the case with some, but I think in my mind we still have to realize that they are young college students, and it's tough when because they're going to read it. Let me say you thing. I have 13 grandchildren, and the usage of phones is something that always bothers me. And I've got kids that kind of control that in their homes, but you can't control that. When it comes to a fan base who's so passionate, and every university has a passionate fan base. So my recommendation, and I got to believe they're doing it, but it would be just to make sure you've got a 2 or 3 year assistance, especially a kid that missed a free throw or missed an easy basket or did this, and it seemed like it was the reason we lost the game. When in actuality, there were a lot of things that led to that loss. And if I had that circumstance, I'd probably just, would have talked to Dave or Heath or Teddy or whoever it was, and just go check and make sure he's okay while I'm dealing with all this other stuff. So I think that's how you manage it.
It's funny you say that. We're talking to Coach Steve Cleveland, and Dave Rose, one of his last years, I was sitting in his office at the new Annex building. He was talking about how kids each year, his roster was turning over because players XYZ thought they should be this or that, and they weren't in the offense, so they were going to transfer out. And for a program like BYU, you need to develop guys. And I think that's part of the reason that the Cougs have been successful this season is that they didn't have a lot of turnover from one year to the next. And he said, you talk about being available for all the stuff and information on their phones and whatnot. He made a line that stuck with me. He said that today's player, they look up at their father as they're walking off the court at halftime, and their father's got the phone out, and he's telling the individual player where his latest ranking is on KenPom.com, and they know it before they get into the locker room at halftime. And that line made me laugh because that's what's available, and they've got all this stuff coming at them today that maybe they didn't have when you were doing it, and they certainly had it, but not as readily available as it is. It's literally in their palm of their hands now at all times.
Yep, no.
And that made me laugh when he said that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm glad I didn't have to deal with that at that magnitude. Then it was newspapers and radio and TV, and we did it that way, and it wasn't firsthand, and it wasn't at the moment. It wasn't as he walked into to the halftime into the locker room that we're getting new information on what's happening with the team.
Right.
I can't imagine that. That being said, I thought it was interesting. I was listening to a post game at BYU, and I won't tell you who the players are or anything there, but the conversation was, you're not playing a lot. Has that been difficult for you? You kind of went into that deal, and the young man was really transparent and very open, and I was surprised by that. And then he indicated to me that one of the cool things that the program has is they have 3 therapists, and usually 2 of them are on site for most practice. 1 or 2 of them are there for practices, for pre-game, pre-practice, post-practice, where these young men have an opportunity to kind of work through things in ways that I never, ever thought what could be. I mean, usually it was a coach, a head coach or an assistant coach to sit down and give you some of the same advice and counsel. But this is really important to the young men in this program that they have access to that. Because what it does, you're going to get it from the family anyway when you get home, and they'll have all of their interpretations and how everything's discombobulated. But at the end of the day, probably not a bad thing. I mean, he sincerely and genuinely was thoughtful and talked about his struggles and how hard it was to not play and this and this and that. But he said that it had been a great straight support to him to get that kind of support from someone that was around the program but wasn't a parent, wasn't a coach, and that they could talk really privately about anything. And so with that being said, you get ahead of the game as a coaching staff by providing professional help. Mind you, parents and siblings and the fan base are still going to have their opinions, but maybe this is a way to help them remain more grounded and that they're listening to this guy, that there's a connection and there's a trust that helps that student athlete get through these types of things. The other stuff's still going to be there, but now he can process it better than if he just comes home and listens to mom and dad, congratulate them or rip them, or rip the coaches. Usually it's probably rip the coaches. What are they thinking? But I don't know. I don't know what you guys think, but I thought that was a pretty solid thing for him to share. And I learned something there that's another part of your team that never existed. We just did that as assistants on our own, but probably not as well as maybe a professional can do it,
right,
helping a young person kind of feel better about themselves.
I looked it up, Coach. You were on a 9-game losing streak at that point, and when you went, you had lost 10 out of 11 when you went to New Mexico, and the only team that you had beaten during that stretch was Air Force.
Yep.
See,
there you go.
So I gotta overrule you, man. I still think Air Force going to New Mexico.
No.
I'm siding with Coach. I'm siding with Coach Cleveland after that endorsement that he gave for mental toughness and for mental performance coaches. I'm with Coach Cleveland. I think that BYU win is way bigger than the Air Force win this weekend. It's not even close. And I appreciate all the nice things that you said about mental performance coaches, Coach. That was great.
I appreciate. Hey, you know what? It's what's interesting as we look back at those things, and I think back to those things, you lose like that. I mean, those kids are in therapy every day with you with one thing or another, but it was also a time to really connect with your guys. I mean, I know every one of those players, and I'm kind of writing a book and I'm going to do some speaking things on some thoughts I had that I'm kind of putting in play here in the next few months. So I've actually gone back and looked at the experiences that I had, and that still goes down as the greatest experience that I've ever had. And I didn't tell you this, but we met as a team. We had all the issues getting there, but the night before, amongst all this losing, I had the audacity to tell them that our goal is to win 2 games to get to the tournament, the WAC tournament. And I walked out the door, and I mean, I wasn't 5 steps out of the door. I thought, what in the heck are you doing here? And I just had to impress. I went back and said, listen, this is real. This could be your moment. I don't know that it'll happen, but that's how we have to, and I guess in my gut, I thought, what have I done here, to set these kids up, and make them feel like failures. But it came back, and then having it happen, I don't know. I mean, I lost games I should have won, and I probably won some games I should have lost. But that was the most special moment. I think when I look back to 35 years of coaching, I'll never forget that weekend.
As you shouldn't. All right, hey, we appreciate your time. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Good to be with you. See you.
That was Steve Cleveland joining us as having fun with the most impressive win that I've ever seen. No longer BYU at New Mexico years ago in Steve's first season, but it was Air Force at New Mexico on Saturday. It was a stunner. All right, coming up next, we'll get your What's Trending, 7 o'clock hour coming up. We got a couple of guests we'll tell you about. Stay with us, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.